Hello, this presentation is by the North Jersey Junior Lacrosse League. It's designed for our coaches and the Garden State Lacrosse Official Association referees. This specific video is going to be about the youth rules for the 2025 season. There are several documents everybody needs to be familiar with. One are the National Federation of High School Sport rule book, the USA Lacrosse Youth Rules, and the NJJLL Playing Rules, which can be found here at njlacrosse.com/rules. So these four documents can be found there. So for a rules review for 2025, let's get started. There's a new rule put in place for a penalty on a goalie, and this has to do specifically with whether or not a team has a backup goalie. So, prior to the start of each game, the officials are required to check with the head coach to confirm whether or not a team has a backup goalie. If there is no backup goalie, the officials will then advise the coach that if the goalie commits a time-serving penalty, one releasable minute will be added to the length of the penalty. The reason for that is this. Let's say two teams are playing each other. Both have very good starting goalies. One has a goalie that is a backup and maybe is not quite as good. So in the past, it's been up to the referee to decide whether or not, if there's a backup goalie available, to let the starter stay in or make the backup goalie come in. But that can create an unfair situation where if Team A, who only has one goalie, and he's very good, he gets to stay in the game. But Team B, the referees could decide, you know what, no, we want the backup goalie to come in. And that's not a fair situation. So they put a rule in place now that if a team does not have a backup goalie available to serve the penalty, then the team will get 1 minute added onto the goalie's penalty. So again, just to clarify, this is not a separate penalty in the sense of it's all the same penalty. It's one releasable minute. The in-home will serve the penalty, and it does not count towards the 5 minutes of personal foul time or the three fouls. So if a goalie gets a 2 minute non-releasable cross-check foul, then what happens is there's going to be a 2 minute non-releasable. The first 2 minutes are non-releasable, and then there'll be an additional minute added on for a foul by a goalie, but that last minute is releasable, just designed to even the playing field. So another important rule change is that we have decided that counter to the USA Lacrosse making all youth penalties non-releasable, the league decided last season, they actually changed it during the season, that all penalties are either non-releasable or releasable as determined by the referees as per National Federation rules. When it comes to sticks or cross lengths, as far as the North Jersey Junior Lacrosse League, the important thing to understand is in fifth grade and up, the players must be using a stick that would be legal in a high school game. So the only exception would be third and fourth grade, where instead of a 40-inch minimum, you have a 37-inch minimum, but the lengths have to be the same as they would be in high school. We do allow 4 long poles in fifth through eighth grade. Be careful if you've got a team coming in from out of area. For example, Pennsylvania, they allow long poles in fourth grade. We do not. And if they're playing the game here in New Jersey, they're playing by our rules. And we do not allow coaches to request stick checks in the North Jersey Junior Lacrosse League. Nothing prevents a coach from saying, hey, what do you think of number 14 stick? And it's totally up to the referee whether they want to decide to check that stick. So again, all players in fifth through eighth grade must use a high school legal stick. The difference is how it gets enforced. So in seventh and eighth grade, it's a 2 minute non-releasable penalty for a violation, just as if it was a high school game. In fifth and sixth grade, if the stick is found to be illegal, it's removed from play. There's no penalty time. And in third and fourth grade, as long as the stick passes what we call the ball test, means it doesn't get stuck in there, it comes out freely. As long as it's not a fiddle stick, it's a stick designed for contact lacrosse. We want to let them play. We're not going to take it out of play, especially if it's the only stick the kid has. We just want them to play. And those little scorecards that we do issue to the coaches and the referees have, they're designed that they go down the throat of the stick, and that way a coach can make sure that the kid does not have a pinched pocket and that that part of the stick is legal for play. So we know we got some new face-off rules in the last couple years. Both hands have to be, I take it back, the front hand has to be palm up. There's no more what they call the motorcycle grip or the over-the-top grip. A player cannot initiate contact on a player crouched. In other words, they have to play the ball. And then after they play the ball, they can make legal contact, but it's not really easy to make legal contact to a player who's bent over. Knees cannot touch the ground. Now, here's the thing. In high school, yes, it's a violation. In youth, as long as the player's knees are not touching the ground when the referee says set and blows the whistle, we're not going to be calling violations. We're going to give them the opportunity to learn the right way to do it. There's no advantage as long as everybody's knees are off the ground when set and the whistle is blown. So we know now with face-offs, once a player gets it in the back of his stick, if it's a pinch and pop or plunger or whatnot, they have one step to get the ball out of the back of the stick into the front of the stick. The player cannot lie on the ball, trap it with the cross any longer than is necessary to pick it up with one continuous motion. So you can't clamp on it on the back of the stick and then look to your left, look to your right to see which wing area a guy's open. Now, this is going to get adjudicated differently in 4th grade than it is in 8th grade. 7th and 8th grade, we should do it pretty close to high school. They need to clamp and they need to immediately move it. 3rd and 4th grade, we'll give them a little leeway, maybe a little bit in 5th and 6th grade, but we certainly want to be talking to them, making them aware of the right way to do it. Properly fitted helmet is a point of emphasis this year. It has to do with player safety. The helmet needs to fit properly. All right, the chin strap has to be worn as designed by the manufacturer, meaning the chin strap has to be on the chin. It can't be on the throat. It can't be across the teeth. It needs to be on the chin. All 4 points, 1, 2, and on the other side, need to be secure. One thing to look for is this bottom strap. If it's got a big bow in it, chances are the helmet's not properly adjusted. And another way to tell that is if a player can take his helmet off without undoing the bottom straps, chances are that helmet's not properly adjusted. And there is a rule that came into place last year that if a helmet comes off during play, play will be suspended immediately, and the player shall leave the field until the next dead ball following the resumption of play. So here's what that means. If a player's helmet comes off, and in lacrosse, it does not matter whether it's as a result of a penalty or not. If the player's helmet came off on the field, they need to leave the field. Now, a coach cannot call a timeout to get them back on the field. All right, so what happens is after the player leaves the field, we blow a whistle to restart play. And then when we get our next whistle to stop play, that's when that player can return to the field. Okay, visors. We deal with this issue every year. Parents go out, kids convince their parents to buy them a tinted visor. In lacrosse, tinted visors are never allowed. And unlike other sports, there is no doctor's note that is going to get you on the field. There's also no minimum amount of tinting. I've had people say, well, you can still see the eyes. Any tinting, any amount of reflective coating, anything other than a clear visor is a violation. Now, players can wear sunglasses. That's allowed. But if a player does wear sunglasses, they cannot also wear a clear visor. That has to do with safety if the EMTs or paramedics need to get involved. And then the eye shade rule. This has been around for a few years now. What the players need to understand is the only thing that's allowed is one stroke under each eye. Any excessive eye black on the face or on any part of the body for that matter. They're not allowed to use eye black or any other type of paint to paint anything else on their body. If referees see this, they should be telling the players and the coaches to get it cleaned up. It can be called for a penalty if you've warned them and then they go out there with it anyway. But they need to understand that the only thing that's allowed is one stripe under the eye. They're not allowed to make triangles. They're certainly not allowed to paint their face. And they're not allowed to use eye black paint or anything else to put smiley faces or lines or stripes or anything anywhere else on their body. So now let's talk about the actual play of the game and body checks. So we play by grade level. So 6th grade and below, a player may not deliver a body check to an opponent. Allowable body contact includes legal holds. You can keep a player from advancing. Legal pushes. If a player's running up the sideline, as long as you do it from the front or the side, you can legally push them out of bounds. Now, if they're hit too hard out of bounds, that can be called a body check and that can be called illegal, but you are allowed to push a player out of bounds. Equal pressure, man ball boxing out, what we call defensive positioning to redirect an opponent in possession of the ball. This answers the question when a coach says, well, what are my defensemen supposed to do? Just let the attackman dodge to the goal? Well, no, they can get in their way. They can put their body in their way. But what they can't do until they get to 7th grade is drop their shoulder into them. Once they drop their shoulder into them, now they're delivering a body check, and in 6th grade and below, that is illegal. And any contact deemed incidental by the officials. An example of that in lacrosse might be a player sets a pick, and the player doing the riding doesn't see the pick, and there can be a lot of contact. Now, the officials are pretty good, and we're trained on how to tell whether or not that player saw that pick or didn't. But in our opinion, they didn't see the pick. That's incidental contact, and no matter how bad it looks, that's not something that's going to be a foul. Again, it's really officials' discretion as to whether it was incidental contact or not. And there's other examples. Loose balls, two players could be running for the same loose ball. They could both be concentrating on the ball, and they both hit helmet to helmet when they get to the ball. And for there to be a flag there, the referees had to determine that one of those two players intended for that helmet-to-helmet contact to take place. If in the referee's opinion it was incidental, they were both concentrating on the ball and they just happened to get there at the same time, even though they hit helmet-to-helmet, that's deemed incidental contact. So in 6th grade and below, the fact that there's no body checks does not mean that there's no body contact allowed. So now, in 7th and 8th grade, for contact to be legal, it's very close to the high school rules, but with a few exceptions. It needs to be from the front or the side, above the waist, below the neck, 2 hands on the cross. Now, one difference between high school and youth is a player can only take 2 steps, or they can really only start from 3 yards to get any momentum to put into the hit. In high school, the rule is 5 yards. Now, again, that doesn't prevent the player can run 15, 20 yards to get to a player, but they can't use their entire momentum from that 15 to 20 yard run to hit somebody. But if they do run that far and they do let up significantly in the referee's opinion, they can then still make legal body contact. But again, that's referee's discretion. So the intent in the referee's opinion needed to be to accomplish a lacrosse play, not to punish the other player. So another difference between high school and youth is any hit that's excessively big, it's one of those things that everybody in the place is going, oh my, wow, that was a big hit. Well, while in high school, as long as they did everything legally, it would probably be okay. In youth, if it's an excessively big hit, it's an illegal hit, we're going to call an illegal body check. So now targeting. The best way to describe the difference between targeting and a regular foul is this. If a player cross-checks somebody else to the head or the neck, they can get a 3-minute non-release, or up to a 3-minute non-releasable penalty, and the referees can decide to eject them, whether or not targeting is involved. If it's bad enough, that's within the referee's discretion. The difference is if it's targeting, meaning in the opinion of the referees, the player intended to make the contact primarily to the head or the neck, in which case that's targeting, and in which case it's a 3-minute non-releasable foul, and ejection is required. It's not optional if targeting is the call. So, legal sticks checks in youth lacrosse. In 7th and 8th grade, now, as of last year, we do allow one-handed checks, but the stick checks must be under control. Now, to make legal contact when you're checking somebody, whether you're poking, lifting, slap checking, whatever you're doing, you need to be making contact with the glove or the stick. But something to keep in mind, that a slash can be called even if you get all glove or all stick if the swing is too hard. Somebody's not allowed to take a two-handed chop the tree down swing, or even a one-handed reckless roundabout and whack somebody's stick as hard as they can. A player could still get their hand or finger broken right through the glove if somebody swings excessively hard. So just because a player gets stick or glove does not mean it was a legal check. And on the other side of that, if a player makes a crazy swing that in the referee's opinion was dangerous, they can actually throw a flag, call a slash, even if they didn't make contact. Wrap check holds is where we normally get in trouble in youth lacrosse. That's where a player's trailing someone, riding someone, they're chasing them, and then from behind they wrap their stick around the body, trying to make contact with the other player's stick. Done perfectly, get stick on stick without any contact with the other player's body, you might have a legal wrap check. The problem is if the riding player or the trailing player is chest touches the back of the other player, it's a hold. If his arm comes across and gets on the shoulder of the player when he's making the wrap check, or the arm, it can be a hold. If the free hand on the other side makes contact with the player's back, it can be a hold. There's a lot of things that can go wrong in a wrap check hold, more so than the chance of getting the ball on the ground. So where we see the slashes, where we see the problems with these wrap checks in general, is in what we call the danger zone. The danger zone is the last 10 yards on a ride or a clear before they get to midfield. So now there's just been a transition. Team Green's got the ball. They're going this way. And Team A's attackman is going to ride the midi. So what happens is, while he's chasing A is chasing M, or red is chasing green, they're poke checking, they're wrap checking, they're swinging their stick. They're trying to put the ball on the ground. So in a best case scenario, if A lands a successful check, they might get the ball to go on the ground. If the ball hits the ground, then in a best case scenario, Team A or the red team has a 50-50 chance of picking that ball up. All right. So even if everything goes perfectly, there's only a 50% chance you're actually going to get the ball. What can go wrong, and anybody who's been around this game for a while has seen, this riding player is either A, going to slash this player, B, going to get called for a hold on a wrap check, C is going to chase them a little too hard and they're going to step off sides as the ball transitions into the other zone. So the chances of something bad happening in this last 10 yards for the riding team versus if everything went perfect and they put it on the ball on the ground, it just doesn't make it worth it. So this is just for the coaches. It's a coaching technique that you can use if you want to. But the idea is, if everything goes perfect, and even if he does put a check and put the ball on the ground, you only have a 50-50 shot of getting it back. But yet the number of things that can go wrong, especially in that last 10 yards, again, a slash, a wrap check hold, stepping off sides, there's so much that can go wrong. It's not necessarily worth it. You might want to cut your ride off a little early. So legal stick checks in 6th grade and below. USA Lacrosse does allow one-handed checks for U12, which is 6th grade basically, but the North Jersey Junior Lacrosse League does not. There are no one-handed checks in 6th grade and below. Any stick swinging must be under control, and we should still be encouraging the players to poke and lift. Now, this is something that happens in youth lacrosse. We really don't see it in high school lacrosse a lot. Goalie makes a save. He's got the ball looking for an outlet pass, and now you've got normally an attackman standing on the edge of the crease with their stick up in the air, probably trying to get in their way for them to throw their outlet pass. Now, we all know that if the goalie makes contact with the attackman, or I should say the attackman makes contact with the goalie, either way, that the clearing team's going to get a free clear. But the goalie can't take advantage of this rule, and what we mean is this. They can't, without even trying to make a legitimate pass, just swing with an excessive follow-through. And in the referee's opinion, they were clearly just trying to hit the other player in the head or the shoulder. That's a slash, and that's referee discretion. So depending on how bad it is, if it wasn't too bad the first time, you might want to warn the goalie referees and just say, hey, next time I need to see that you're trying to make a pass, just not trying to get the free clear and hitting him in the head. And then I'd probably try to tell the coach that I just warned the goalie. But if it's bad enough, even on a first attempt, call the slash. Again, the goalie needs to be making a legitimate outlet pass, and a legitimate, non-exaggerated follow-through needs to make contact with the riding player. The other thing is goalies can't body check a defensive player awaiting a pass. This makes sense. It's true anywhere on the field with any player on the field. But what we typically see, and this one we do see in high school sometimes, is the ball's in transition. You've got an attackman who's awaiting a very long pass that's a little high, and the goalie decides they're not going to let him cast the ball. Now, there are legal ways for the goalie to do this. There's legal ways for them to check them, depending on the body, the grade level and the body contact. There's legal ways to check their stick. But what we're talking about here is the attackman has their back to the goal. They're waiting for this long pass, and the goalie decides to come out from behind and blow them up. Obviously, that would be an illegal body check, probably multiple minutes. So let's go over some reminders / misinterpreted rules. In this case, in youth lacrosse, if a player gets 3 personal fouls or 5 minutes of personal foul time, they have fouled out. That is not an ejection. It's just like a player fouling out in basketball. And so when we say personal fouls, we're talking all the fouls that are 1 minute or more. So any 30-second foul for holding, pushing, things like that, those do not count. It's only the 1 minute fouls or greater. So it's 3 personal fouls or 5 minutes. In 6th grade and below, coaches, we know we have running clocks, but what we have to remember is if you want a horn, the ball has to go out of bounds. So if we got a loose ball push on the field and a coach calls horn, they're not entitled to that. What the referees are told is in that situation, at that point, the players are probably running on and off the field anyway. Let it happen. But warn the coach that, coach, if you call for a horn again and the ball did not go out of bounds, you're going to get called with a delay of game penalty, which means if they were entitled to the ball, they're going to lose the ball. If the other team was entitled to the ball and the fast restart, they're now going to go man down for 30 seconds. We want the officials to still perform 2 random stick checks in 7th and 8th grade, and they're also encouraged to check the sticks of any player 5th and 6th grade if they think they see an issue. So again, flag down, slow whistle. This has been around for a while now. So the only thing is 4th grade and below, 3rd grade and below, ball hits the ground, kill it, adjudicate your penalty. Not much good happens when the ball's on the ground at 4th grade and below. This is something that started a couple years ago. Arm pads have to cover the elbow. Typically, it would be a long pole. They try to buy the smallest possible arm pads, and then they try to wear them up here on their bicep where we as referees can't see it. My mechanic for fixing that is, especially if I see more than one player with it, I'm not even going over to the player. I'm just going over to the coach. I said, Coach, I can see right now some of your players don't have their arm pads over their elbow. I'm not going to give any further warnings. If anybody comes onto the field to play like that, it's going to be a 1 minute release, a non-releasable foul. The first time I see a player on the field and their arm pad's not covering their elbow. We do have a 6-goal mercy rule in this league, and what that means is that if a team gets behind by 6 goals or more, that after a goal, they're entitled to the ball at midfield. And this could be after a goal either way. If the team's losing 8-0 and now they score to make it 8-1, the team that's behind still gets the ball at midfield with no face-off. And a coach can waive this if they want to. Maybe they want their face-off midi to get some extra work or whatnot, but they are entitled to the ball without a face-off. We're not allowed to change sticks on the field. This is true at every level of lacrosse. Most common place you see this is a face-off. After the face-off midi, they want a different stick. They run to the sideline, and what they're supposed to do by rule is run off the field, make a hand-to-hand exchange with the coach, or if their stick's on the ground, they can place their stick down, pick another stick up. But what they're not allowed to do is run to the sideline, toss their stick to the side, and then grab another stick from another player. Anytime that stick goes into the air, as a referee, we have the discretion. We can kill it. We're probably taking the ball away because the only reason they would have done that is if they had the ball anyway, and we're going to go the other way. That would be illegal procedure at a minimum. Throwing the stick can also become unsportsmanlike conduct, but in this situation, certainly for a first offense, I'd probably just be taking the ball away. Fast restarts is something that we do in 7th and 8th grade. You can start to talk to the kids about it in 5th and 6th grade, although officials, we still want you just telling them, let them get their 5 yards, and certainly in 3rd and 4th grade, we give them their 5 yards. We're not looking to trick anybody. 7th and 8th grade, what we have to remember is they pick the ball up, they're ready to go, we're blowing the whistle. If any defenders within that 5 yards, if at any time they start to play defense and they had not gotten 5 yards away, we throw a flag and we now have an illegal procedure foul. So again, some rule clarifications, wording. Well, this one's better demonstrated when I can physically show it, but if a player's cradling with the ball down the field and the defender's lifting their bottom arm, and that arm is moving up in the air, if it's moving up in the air as a result of the player lifting it, that is clearly not a ward. But at the same time, if they're lifting that arm, that elbow, and that player takes his bottom hand, the cradling player takes his bottom hand off his stick, swings it around, and re-grabs the bottom of the stick, that is not a ward unless, when they had it off, they used the free hand to attempt to direct the stick or the body of the opponent. So again, the simple disengaging, taking my hand, even though he goes up in the air with it and comes back around, if they didn't use it to try to direct the stick or the body of the opponent, that is not a ward. The other thing we have to remember, the change to the warding rule is, it used to be that as long as a player kept 2 hands on his stick, they could not be called for a ward. Well, now, if a player does have 2 hands on their stick and they drive into somebody and they use their arms to thrust away to create separation, that now at referee discretion can also be called a ward and the ball can be taken away. Stick on stick holding. This is pretty simple if you understand the rule. Anytime there's a loose ball, if a player is within 5 yards of that ball, they're subject to having their stick checked and or held. So as long as they're within 5 yards and one player is trying to scoop up a ground ball, if another player, A, holds their stick down, doesn't let them get there, as long as they're only on the stick, another player checks their stick, again, as long as they're within 5 yards. If a player has the stick, they just picked up a ground ball, but now the long pole, has the stick across the head of their stick and they're not letting them come up, that is not a hold. Now, if the defender gets their stick across the arm of the other player and they're not letting them come up, well, then that's up to the referee to determine whether that rises to the level of a hold. We know the goalie gets 5 seconds after a shot, but this is just to remind people and coaches who don't know that, let's say the goalie makes a save and they want to become part of the clear and they run the ball and they run across midfield, and at some point we get a dead ball. Well, that goalie still gets 5 seconds to get back. They don't get to go all the way back to the crease, but once we're ready to restart play, the referee should start the visible and verbal 5 count, and regardless of whether the goalie's back in net or not, at the end of that is when we would restart play. Delay a game, 5 seconds is the same thing. Let's say after a shot, the ball goes out of bounds. There's a ball readily available for the player, but yet he's staying off the field, and whether he has the ball or there's a ball at his feet, they're not coming on the field. Well, the referee's going to start a 5-second count because as long as the ball's available to them, they only have 5 seconds to step on the field so that we can blow the whistle. And then cross-check holds. Several years ago, it used to be illegal to use the portion of a stick between your hands. So let's say you've got your stick out in front of you in a cross-check position, your hands are shoulder width apart. It used to be illegal to even use that to keep a player from advancing. Well, now that's not illegal. That's a legal cross-check hold. But what they're not allowed to do is use a punching motion or a cross-check motion and bringing their stick off the player's body and thrusting it back into the body. That's a cross-check. So cross-check holds are legal, but cross-checks, if you're going to use any thrusting that comes off their body and back into it, that becomes a cross-check, and that is subject to a foul. We also have what we call a misconduct foul. It's basically like a timeout rule. It happens in youth lacrosse. Maybe a player's frustrated. They got checked. The ball got knocked out of their stick. They missed a shot. And they're running around and they're just looking for somebody to hit. Well, as referees, we're supposed to say, Coach, we need you to go talk to number 12. Try to calm him down. After we've done that, we don't have to wait for this player to do something to hurt somebody. We can then stop play if needed, come over and say, Coach, 12, I'm giving a 5-minute misconduct foul. The team is not going man down, but that player gets a cooling off period of 5 minutes. It can also be in addition to a time serving. Let's say the player does come up and slashes somebody across the back. Well, you can give your 1, 2, or 3 minute penalty, but then the referee can also add on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 minute misconduct to it. So the team will play man down for the amount of the penalty, but then that player is still not eligible to re-enter the game until the misconduct time would be up. So we'll go through this quickly. Timing rules, 6th grade and below. We know we play 12-minute quarters. The clock stops for timeouts. There's no counts, no over and back, no keep it in at the end of the game. When we say no counts, there is still 4 seconds for the goalie. The goalie has 4 seconds to get rid of the ball. There's no overtime. But we do now have, in 4th grade, 10v10, we have time serving penalties. 3rd and 4th grade, we have a new penalty rule. We have a whole separate video on the YouTube channel with our 7v7 rules. Now, during the last 2 minutes of a game that is either a 2-goal game, a 1-goal game, or a tie game, the running time game changes to stop time. And it's important, coaches, referees might not remember this. The timekeeper might not know this. So as we're getting close to this, if we're in that situation, when you get an opportunity, remind the coaches, let's remind the timekeepers that if it's a 2-minute game, the last 2 minutes of the game, not of the half of the game, becomes stop time. If at any time somebody scores and it goes to a 3-goal lead, we go right back to running time. But again, even if the game is tied, the last 2 minutes we're playing stop time. 7th and 8th grade, we play 10-minute stop time quarters. Basically, all high school rules are in effect here. There's over and back. There's keep it in. One difference is, though, for running time in the second half, in high school it's 12 goals. In youth, we have 10 goals. And once we get to running time, even if a team brings the goal differential way down, once it's in running time, it stays running time. We do play 2 periods of overtime in 7th and 8th grade. However, if it's one of the 8th grade games that's required for playoffs, The coaches should make sure the referees know this before the game even starts. But if that is the case, then we play like high school rules. We play overtime until there's a winner. So again, with running time, penalty enforcement starts when we resume play. It doesn't start when the player gets to the penalty box. And the other thing is when we're running time, penalties are stop time. So whoever's keeping penalty time needs to be able to not just keep the running time of the game, they need to be able to stop time the penalties, and there might be multiple penalties. So they need to be prepared to be able to do this. And then whenever there's time remaining on a penalty when a goal is scored, the earliest a penalty can be released is on the ensuing faceoff when it's completed. Meaning, let's say it's this would really only probably happen in a non-releasable penalty. Although it could happen if the team scored man down but they're shorthanded. Let's say there's 7 seconds left on a penalty and we're about to face off and a kid's in the penalty box. Well, even in high school, what we referees know to do is go over to the box area, remind the timer, remind the coaches that coaches, even if the 7 seconds is up for the player in the box, he cannot enter the field until A, his penalty time is up, and B, the face-off is ended. The face-off can end one of two ways. We declare possession on the field. Some referees yell release, possession, the color, whatever. Or the ball crosses one of the defensive line areas, which is the area at the top of the box of the defensive end. But until the face-off is over, even if the penalty is over, that player cannot enter the field. So this is a USA lacrosse rule that's put in effect a couple years ago. It doesn't happen very often. But any penalty within 3 minutes of the end of the game by the team that's ahead, as long as it's a 2-goal game or less, the game gets extended until the penalty time is complete. Meaning, let's say there's a minute left in the game, and the team that's ahead, they're ahead 3-1. That team takes a slash, and they get a 3-minute slash. Well, now the game's not ending in a minute. The game's ending in 3 minutes from when the penalty happened. So in this case, the game would go 2 minutes extra. Now, if the penalty is releasable, this is not as important because as soon as the team scores 1 goal, the penalty is released, and if we're in that extra time, the game is over. But if it is a non-releasable penalty, well, then the team would have the opportunity to tie or even take the lead during that extended time. So coaches, as far as timekeepers, you need to provide an adult timekeeper. The timekeeper cannot also be a coach. Meaning that when there's a timeout between quarters and whatnot, they can't be leaving the timing area to go into the huddle with the team. So they must stay in the box area the entire game. If there's no visible clock available, we ask the timekeepers to periodically yell out, there's 6 minutes left, there's 4 minutes left, certainly the last minute, and then we normally ask the timekeepers to count the last 10 seconds down loud. And again, timekeepers must be prepared to account for multiple penalties at the same time that are releasing at different times. So here's something that's become necessary within the league. For the 5th through 8th grade 10v10 games, it is possible to play the games with fewer than 10 players. So if a player has left, if one team has less than 10 players, they can play with 9 going 2-3-2. We're not counting the goalie here, obviously. So 3 defenders, 2 middies, 3 attack. You can go 3 defenders, 1 middie, 3 attack. You can go 2-2-2 if you only have 7 players. But if it's an 8th grade playoff game that counts towards their group standings and one team has less than 10 players, the other team does not have to agree to go to match them. Now, other things that are permissible, if you're playing a team that only has 8 or 7 players, it's totally okay if you have excessive number of players, extra players, to let them go play for them for that game. Everybody gets more playing time, and we're there to have fun and for the kids to learn how to play lacrosse. That's totally acceptable. Again, we're not talking about the 8th grade games that count towards the playoffs. But one thing that cannot happen is you cannot play with less than 7 players. But even if we're playing the 2-2-2-1, we're still playing on the full field. We do not play small field unless we're playing true 7v7 3rd or 4th grade games. So again, the idea is let the kids play. If a team shows up and they don't have enough players, the right thing to probably do is to match them numbers so that we have a fair game out there. But there's lots of options, swapping players and whatnot. Let the kids play. So what should coaches expect from the referees? That we arrive on time and that we don't leave early. Well, that's always easier said than done. Um, During the week, most of us have a varsity game that was probably scheduled to start at 4 or 4:30. But the unfortunate reality is we don't have any control over whether that game starts on time, and we certainly don't have any control over what time it ends, whether it goes to overtime, whether there was injuries during the game that extended it. But every referee that I know that I work with, we will then bust our butt to get to your game on time. However, when we do get there, we expect to have some place to park. Now, what I'm about to say does not apply to 90+% of the programs out there. But who it does apply to are the programs that have a limited parking available in their main parking lot. And then when that becomes full, the parents and or referees are then expected to drive into neighborhoods and look for a parking spot or drive to an alternate lot that's a couple blocks away. If you're in that situation, then we absolutely expect you to do what they do in football for us in most cases is something like this. Get a cone, get a sign. I'm not saying you have to save the best two spots for the referees. In fact, if you've got a large lot, I don't care if the referees have to park in the very back of it, as long as they get to park in the main lot. This is when we're expected to drive into neighborhoods, drive down the street to a secondary lot, things like that. You got to put cones up, put signs on so that the parents know that these spots are for the referees. So when we get there, we have a reasonable place to park. The referee should never be telling the coaches that we're starting before the starting time. So if it's a 6:30 start and both teams have been there, but it's 6:15 and they both look like they're ready, the referees are not allowed to go up to the coaches and say, we're going. Now, if the coaches talk to each other and you're ready to start early, you want to say to the referees, hey, we're ready to go. That is obviously totally okay. But the referees should never be telling you you're starting before the actual starting time. Referees should always answer reasonable questions about a head coach. They should not be arguing rules and calls, but you should answer reasonable questions. But this may be limited if it could delay the restart of the game. So in other words, if I call a loose ball push, we're going this way, I'm going to blow the whistle. I'm not going to turn around then and explain to you why I thought that was a loose ball push. And we should always be courteous, not argumentative. What do officials expect from the coaches? That you can control the conduct of your coaches, players, parents, and spectators. That you have your digital ID ready when we approach you. That you know the rules. That you ask questions about rules and calls. Don't scream looking for calls. That you start games on time whenever possible. Well, here's one of the rules on that. If it is 6:30 and Team A has 18 players and Team B has 13 players and both teams have a goalie, we're starting. We're not waiting because your best left-handed attackman or your best long pole are not there yet, or even your starting goalie's not there yet. That's not a reasonable reason to delay a game. If you don't have enough players, you don't have a goalie at all, maybe. But that's the rule there. You need to provide a reliable adult timekeeper, and you need to have balls on the end line. And I'm going to give you a hint, coaches, that 6th grade and below, when the clock is running, the referees are not going to care whether you put end line balls out. If you want to waste 20-30% of these kids playing time, that every time somebody takes a shot or the ball goes out of bounds, they got to chase it, and then you're wasting 20-30 seconds before we restart play, the referees aren't going to care. They are going to care in 7th and 8th grade. And as a home team, you're responsible to not just put balls out there at the beginning of the game, but to maintain the end line balls. So typically what I'll do in high school or in youth is I'll warn the coach, you need some more end line balls over here. I might warn him a second time. But after that, you can take a delay of game penalty if you don't have end line balls available. And then the next team up ready to go. Here's what we're talking about, and this happens in football and lacrosse. We see it that, okay, so now you're the 8 o'clock game. The 6:30 game is running late, and it's now 8:10. And when that game ends, after the starting time of the next game, we as referees expect to be able to turn around and see two teams ready to walk on the field for us to get the game going. But all too often what we see is we look behind one end zone and we see one team still doing line drills and warming up, and we look behind the other side and the other team's still doing line drills and warming up, and now we have to go get them to bring them back. That's not right. That's not fair. When you know that your game should have started already, at some point before the game before you ends, you need to have your teams over there ready to go on the field. And the officials should be paid no later than halftime, whether that's a coach who's going to be there, a treasurer who's going to be there. The game ends, the referees want to be heading towards the parking lot. They don't want to be trying to track you down to get paid. So everything that we talked about today can be found on the league website. You can either go to njlacrosse.com rules or njlacrosse.com/2025. And if you go to our YouTube page, we have several other videos about this year's rules. Have a great day.